are in the Communist Manifesto, either explicitly or implicitly. Capital punishment, or what many people call the death penalty, is our sixth social issue. Within Christianity has arisen a movement known as Reconstructionism, which seeks to solve the ills of our society by returning to a strict interpretation of the old law. As incredible as it may sound, its adherents seek to return to an era in which an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth reigned supreme. Their philosophy borders on the absurd and is reminiscent of the Ayatollah's Iran or the Middle Ages. You don't have to read all the old law to see that injustice would reign supreme if this were instituted. A quick look at the penalties pertaining to capital punishment alone is more than enough to convince all but the most stubborn observer that this is not the way to proceed. Before anybody jumps on this bandwagon to mayhem, a big mistake indeed, he'd do well to note just the violations for which one can be executed in the Old Testament. It is also crucial to note that these rules are no more sensible now than they were when they were passed thousands of years ago. A few are reasonable, but most range from dubious to preposterous. There are at least 34 reasons for which you can be executed in the Old Testament, and among the most prominent are the following. Numbers 15:32 to 35 says, "While the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man who gathered sticks on the Sabbath day. And the Lord said to Moses, 'The man shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him outside the camp.'" Unquote. Oh my goodness, what a dastardly deed. He gathered sticks on the Sabbath. Shame, shame. Exodus 31:14 to 15 requires the death penalty for doing any work on the Sabbath. Exodus 19:12 in the Revised Standard Version says, "Take heed that you do not go out to the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death." Imagine executing somebody because he merely touched a mountain. According to Numbers 3:38, any stranger who comes near the congregation's tabernacle is to be put to death. He doesn't have to do anything. Merely approaching it is sufficient. Another lesson in keeping your distance is found in Numbers 3:10, which states, "You shall appoint Aaron and his sons, and they shall attend to their priesthood. But if anyone else comes near, he shall be put to death." According to the old law, in many instances, you don't have to do anything other than saying the wrong words. Physical acts aren't required. Exodus 21:7 and Leviticus 29 say, "Whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death." And Leviticus 24:14 says, "Bring out of the camp him who cursed, and let all the congregation lay their hands upon his head, and let the congregation stone him." Unquote. If everyone on earth who has ever cursed were killed, the world's population would be decimated. According to Exodus 21:15, "He who smites his father or his mother shall be put to death." Although striking one's parents is worse than cursing them, it doesn't deserve the death penalty. Deuteronomy 21:18 to 21 goes so far as to require all men of the city to stone a son to death who is viewed as stubborn and rebellious by his parents. Viewed. If this rule were ever enacted, carnage would reign supreme throughout the youth of this nation. The injustice of this lies in the fact that the sons need only be viewed as stubborn and rebellious. That doesn't necessarily mean they are. According to Exodus 21:29, you are to be executed if your ox gores someone to death and has been accustomed to goring people or goring things in the past. If Leviticus 20:27 were enacted, we would have to execute any man or woman who is a medium or a wizard. And that would include the large number of people who deal with astrology, horoscopes, seances, fortune-telling, the New Age, and signs of the zodiac. And finally, we would have to kill all those women who now claim to be witches if we took Exodus 20:18 seriously, because it says, a verse you're probably all familiar with, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Remember the Salem witch trials? One of the most negative aspects of biblical commandments regarding executions has to do with the large number of sex acts with which the old law has no tolerance whatever, and for which capital punishment is deemed appropriate. Apparently, some of the Old Testament authors had serious problems with this topic because they allowed very little deviation from the accepted path. Exodus 22:19 says, whoever lies with a beast shall be put to death. And Deuteronomy 22:20-21 requires capital punishment for any female who is not a virgin on her wedding day. I wonder how they propose to determine that. Several verses do prohibit sexual conduct that is outlawed today, but no sane society would have a death penalty attached. For example, Leviticus 20:10 says, if a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death. Leviticus 20:11 mandates capital punishment by saying, the man who lies with his father's wife has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall be put to death. Their blood is upon them. Unquote. Incest shouldn't be a capital offense. And how could the nakedness of the father have been uncovered since the son didn't lie with his father? Leviticus 20:12 prescribes, quote, if a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall be put to death. They have committed incest, their blood is upon them. Unquote. A reasonable man would conclude that their blood is upon the executioner rather than themselves, because the punishment is too stringent for the crime. Leviticus 20:14 prohibits any sexual conduct or contact between a man and his mother-in-law, and requires death by fire for all violators. For some married men, the act itself would be comparable to death by fire. Leviticus 20:13 condemns homosexuality and specifically states that any male who lies with another male as with a woman has committed an abomination and should be killed.